Hello and welcome back to Political Debrief. I'm your host, Josh Oliverio. Today, we're talking about mandate letters. More specifically, the Supreme Court of Canada ruling that Premier Doug Ford doesn't have to release his. This court case originated from an access to information request filed by CBC News that was declined by the Ontario government. The Ontario government took the case all the way to the highest court in Canada, arguing that these are cabinet documents and that they should not be allowed to be released publicly. To talk about this ruling and what significance it has and why mandate letters even matter, I'm joined today by Rob Benzie, the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Hope you enjoy our conversation now. Rob Benzie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So first of all, do you want to just give us kind of an overview? What are mandate letters and why are they typically released to the public?
Well, they're not typically released to the public. At least they weren't until a few years ago. Mandate letters is a relatively new thing in Canada. But when Mike Harris was the premier in the 1990s, they gave marching orders to cabinet ministers here at Queen's Park, and they were just outlining the kind of their tasks and what their expectations were. And this continued through Ernie Eves as premier, then Dalton McGuinty was premier, and most people really didn't even know about the existence of mandate letters until 2014, when Kathleen Wynne made a big production of releasing them. And then we could see what each minister's tasks were supposed to be. She did this just after winning that election that summer. And there were some stories done on them at the time because it was interesting that they were being released. And I think what happened was, because she had released them in 2014 and then again in 2016 after a cabinet shuffle, I think that led people to believe that they were always going to be released. And when Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, he followed her lead and released his mandate letters. And having read federal and provincial mandate letters, they are really just glorified press releases, especially if they're written for public consumption, as Kathleen Wynne's and Justin Trudeau's were. And the Doug Ford cabinet mandate letters that were eventually leaked to Global News in 2023, his letters from 2018, there's nothing salacious or interesting in them. So I don't know why Mr. Ford didn't just release them, but for whatever reason, when he came into office in 2018, he said he wasn't going to release them, reporters asked, and CBC filed a Freedom of Information request, as is their right, to try to get those letters. And the government fought them. The Privacy Commissioner sided with the CBC, and so did the two lower courts here in Ontario, and before it went to the Supreme Court, and then it was actually crushed in a 7-0 decision that was written by Madam Justice Andromache Karakastanis, who used to be the Secretary of Cabinet here in Ontario. So she was the head of the public service. So she actually knows a lot about how government works and how cabinets work. And I think because of her expertise of knowing how there is a need for confidentiality in government to get discussions. I mean, she wrote a very persuasive brief, and all of her colleagues agreed with it.
Do you see this as changing any sort of the precedents when it comes to mandate letters? Like, do you foresee that all of a sudden we're going to see mandate letters that might have been thought to be going to be released publicly that now just aren't?
I don't know. I mean, I think depending on who wins the next election, Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal leader, said right away that if she's elected and becomes premier in 2026, she'll release her minister's mandate letters. And I can predict that those letters, if she becomes premier, will be similarly full of lofty platitudes and vague, directions. I mean, I think the problem for Ford is this was a communications problem as much as anything else. He looked sneaky and secretive by not putting them out there, even though there was nothing much in them. And I think because of that, everyone's imaginations went wild. I mean, Twitter, which is a notoriously unreliable place to get any news or information, you would have thought that the caramel secret was buried in these letters. And he's going to pave the greenbelt and it'll be a mandate letter. I mean, unfortunately, for people who don't know anything about Ontario politics or don't know anything about politics, mandate letters are not binding. So you don't have to put anything in a mandate letter. I mean, a minister can do things beyond what's in a mandate letter, and they cannot achieve everything that is in a mandate letter. It's not, it's not a legal document or anything like that. So I think, but that got lost on a lot of people. I mean, I was astounded at how the mandate letter canard almost became this huge deal, and hundreds and thousands of dollars in legal fees from the public treasury. On both, whether it's a broadcaster or in the government, that's a lot of money spent on proving a point. And the precedent that would have been set, Josh, if the ruling had gone the other way, would be that there wouldn't be secrecy. Potentially the precedent would have been that there is no such thing as cabinet secrecy or cabinet confidentiality. Look, as a reporter, I don't mind that, but as someone who believes in logic and rational thinking, I think that I could see the problems with that, because what you'd do is you'd get people wouldn't write anything down. Government would be done over the phone. It would be even more shadowy, or you'd get people performing, so that every time a cabinet minister said something in cabinet, it was like speech meant for public consumption. So it wouldn't be a candid, honest debate. It would be platitudes and performance, and that's problematic. I think, just as when I'm writing a news story, I don't think all of my notes on every single interview should be made public right away. I need to distill it down. I need to curate the story in a way and get the facts, get all the facts. And I think there is a problem nowadays that everyone thinks freedom of information requests are automatically newsworthy, no matter what you get from them. And I think that's not necessarily how you get news. I mean, the guys at Global News who ended up getting the mandate letters didn't get them by an FOI. They got them by doing their legwork and talking to people and having sources and ferreting out information. Watergate was not broken by FOIs. It was broken by legwork and people talking. At the end of the day, journalism is about a lot of different things. Freedom of information requests for stuff that governments don't want out there is for sure valuable, but it is not the only thing that's valuable.
Let's change gears a little bit and talk about reaction. You mentioned Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, but what's Mike Schreiner and Marit Stiles saying about this?
So Mike Schreiner, the Green leader, was saying that this is a bad precedent. He's worried about it. Marit Stiles says because the government has so many problems and is seen as kind of shadowy in any way because of the Greenbelt land swap fiasco. That's a scandal that's currently under investigation from the RCMP. So Marit Stiles was saying, look, this is what else are they trying to hide? And frankly, this is where the Conservatives of Doug Ford have had a problem, because the optics for them are that they are doing things that the public doesn't really know what's happening behind the scenes. And I think that's a fair assessment. It's a fair criticism. The thing is, though, if Marit Stiles or Bonnie Crombie or Mike Schreiner become premier, they are going to want to consult with their cabinet without everyone knowing every single consultation. And I think that's where they're going to run into problems, because there's going to be some things that cabinet confidentiality is necessary. And I think that's something that they're going to have to wrestle with. But I'm sure those are the kind of problems that they will love to wrestle with, because it would mean that they're the premier and Ford is not.
You mentioned what the NDP was saying about, and I think it's kind of interesting because you raised an interesting point, or the NDP, I guess, raised an interesting point, how the PCs are in a little bit of ethics trouble right now on a couple of fronts. How much do you think that this mandate letter fiasco is going to harm their reputation, maybe long term? Does it have any impact?
I don't think it has any impact, to be honest with you. I mean, the ruling it's the first time they've won at the Supreme Court, so in that way, it was a good news story for them. And the people who were following this closely are more obsessed with it than those of us who actually get paid to cover this stuff. So I'm not sure it causes them any reputational harm. The Tories have far bigger problems than the mandate letters.
Well, I've got you for 30 seconds. Do you want to just give us kind of a look to 2024 at Queen's Park? We're about a month and a half in now, but what's going to be the key thing that people need to watch from the Ontario government over the next year?
Well, I mean, we're still watching the Greenbelt scandal. I mean, the RCMP is investigating. If charges come this year, and it's someone, either close to or tangentially near the Ford government, then that's going to be problematic for the premier. And certainly the opposition parties are banking on something happening. But again, RCMP investigations, they don't have a timeline like an election calendar. So it could be next year. It could be the year after. The next election is still, almost a little more than 2 years away. So the Tories have a lot of time to recover if there are charges this year. But if there are charges and it's someone who could be considered linked to Ford in some way, and it's in late 2025, then that will cause them big problems in the election.
What about a cabinet shuffle? Because there have been a couple minor cabinet shuffles by Premier Ford, mostly to fill vacancies or whatever. But what about a more large scale overhaul of the cabinet?
Yeah, maybe in the summer or in June. I mean, they had kind of a flurry of them last summer because Steve Clark and Monty McNaughton and Khalid Rashid all left for different reasons. Monty McNaughton voluntarily, the other two less so, perhaps. But I mean, cabinet shuffles are they're a chance for a government to reboot and to reset. But I don't think in the broader public that they have that much of impact on voter intention. It's not like people are going to say, "Oh, so-and-so is the minister of widgets now, so I'm going to vote for this party." I don't think that's how it works.
All right, awesome. Rob Benzie, thanks so much for taking the time for me today.
My pleasure, Josh.
And that's it for this episode of Political Debrief. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I invite you to subscribe down below, check out the podcast version, and check out the blog post with some more information. As well, I've linked down below the global news report with the leaked mandate letters if you want to check them out. Hope you enjoyed the episode. See you next time.